Guys, it's me, Miss Norris, and today I'd like to share a fun read aloud with you of the story The Goat in the Rug. The story The Goat in the Rug was written in 1976 and is told by Charles L. Blood and Marin Link, and it's illustrated by Nancy Winslow Parker, and it tells the story of Geraldine, the sheep, and what they do in the Navajo Nation with sheep. If you're ready to hear the story, I'm ready to share it with you. Here we go. The Goat in the Rug. My name is Geraldine, and I live near a place called Window Rock with my Navajo friend Glenmae. It's called Window Rock because it has a big round hole in it that looks like a window open to the sky. So she lives in Arizona in a place called Window Rock, and there's this is a real place, and it has an actual rock that looks like it has a window looking through it. Glenmae is called Glenmae most of the time because it's easier to say than her Indian name, Glenazba. In English, that means something like female warrior, but she's really a Navajo weaver. I guess that's why one day she decided to weave me into a rug. So we can see Glenmae picking up Geraldine, and I don't know how she's going to make her into a rug yet, do you? I remember it was a warm, sunny afternoon. Glenmae had spent most of the morning sharpening a large pair of scissors. I had no idea what she was going to use them for, but it didn't take me long to find out. So she's sharpening some big scissors, making them really, really sharp, and Geraldine's about to find out why. Before I knew what was happening, I was on the ground and Glenmae was clipping off my wool in great long strands. It's called mohair, really. It didn't hurt at all, but I admit I kicked up my heels some. I'm very ticklish for a goat. I might have looked a little naked and silly afterwards, but my, did I feel nice and cool. So I decided to stick around and see what would happen next. So Glenmae sharpened those big scissors so that she could remove all of Geraldine's hair, mohair, and she looked in the mirror and saw herself, and she thought she looked silly, but she felt nice and cool and decided to stick around to see what would happen next. The first thing Glenmae did was chop up roots from a yucca plant. The roots made a soapy, rich lather when she mixed them with water. She washed my wool in the suds until it was clean and white. So she made a soap out of a plant that's actually New Mexico's state flower, the yucca, and she washed Geraldine's wool until it was nice and clean and white. After that, a little bit of me, you might say, was hung up in the sun to dry. When my wool was dry, Glenmae took out 2 large square combs with many teeth. By combing my wool between these carding combs, as they're called, she removed any bits of twigs or burrs and straightened out the fibers. She told me it helped make a smoother yarn for spinning. So Glenmae hung up the wool to dry and then used these combs called carding combs to make sure that the wool was nice and smooth and didn't have anything in it. Then Glenmae carefully started to spin my wool, one small bundle at a time, into yarn. I was beginning to find out it takes a long while to make a Navajo rug. Again and again, Glenmae twisted and pulled the wool. Then she spun it around a long, thin stick she called a spindle. As she twisted and pulled and spun, the the finer, the stronger, and smoother the yarn became. So Glenmae is pulling and spinning the wool into a bundle and putting it on something called a spindle. And every time she pulls it, it becomes finer and stronger. And Geraldine is realizing that it takes a very long time to make a Navajo rug. A few days later, Glenmae and I went out for a walk. She said we were going to find some special plants she would use to make dye. I didn't know what dye meant, but it sounded like a picnic to me. I do love to eat plants. That's what got me into trouble. So Glenmae has a list of plants: rabbit brush, wild onion, cliff rose, sumac, juniper, walnuts, and dock that she wanted to collect to help dye her wool. But Geraldine didn't know what dye meant, but she thought it meant picnic, and she liked that. But it said that it got her into some trouble. Dun, dun, dun! Oh, Geraldine. When Glenmae was out looking for more plants, I ate every one she had already collected in her bucket. Delicious. The next day, Glenmae made me stay home while she walked miles to a store. She said the dye she could buy wasn't the same as the kind she makes from plants, but since I'd made such a pig of myself, it would have to do. So Geraldine ate all the plants that Glenmae was going to use for dyeing the wool. So the next day, poor Geraldine, she had to stay home, and Glenmae had to go buy dye. And she said it wasn't the same as her plants, but it was going to have to do. I was really worried that she would still be angry with me when she got back. She wasn't, though, and pretty soon she had 3 big potfuls of dye boiling over a fire. Then I saw what Glenmae had meant by dyeing. She dipped my white wool into one pot, and it turned pink. She dipped it in again. It turned darker pink. By the time she'd finished dipping it in and out and hung it up to dry, it was a beautiful, deep red. So Geraldine thought Glenmae was going to be upset, but she wasn't, and she made dye and had it boiling on fires. And then she started dipping the wool to make different colors, and it went from white to a very pretty red. After that, she dyed some of my wool brown and some of it black. I couldn't help wondering if those plants I'd eaten would turn all of me the same colors. So she's imagining, oh no, I ate all of those things. And she's imagining herself all the different colors of the wool. While I was worrying about that, Glenmae started to make our rug. She took a ball of yarn and wrapped it around and around 2 poles. I lost count when she reached 300 wraps. I guess I was too busy thinking about what it would be like to be the only red, white, black, and brown goat at Window Rock. So Glenmae has started to get ready to make the rug, and she's winding the yarn around these 2 poles. And Geraldine got distracted daydreaming about being a multicolored goat in Window Rock and lost track after 300 wraps. So it's even more than 300 wraps around. It wasn't long before Glenmae had finished wrapping. Then she hung the poles with yarn on a big wooden frame. It looked like a picture frame made of logs. She called it a loom. After a whole week of getting ready to weave, Glenmae started. She began weaving at the bottom of the loom. Then, one strand of yarn at a time, our rug started growing toward the top. So she hung up all the yarn that she'd wrapped on the 2 poles in another frame and she called it a loom. A loom is what weavers do to weave fabric. And then after a week of getting ready, she was finally able to sit down and start weaving the rug. Just a little piece at a time. A few strands of black, a few of brown, a few of red, in and out, back and forth, until in a few days the pattern of our rug was clear to see. Our rug grew very slowly, just as every Navajo weaver before her had done for hundreds and hundreds of years. Glenmae formed a design that would never be duplicated. So she's using little bits of every color. You can see them in her little basket. And she's weaving a pattern, and there will never be another Navajo rug that looks exactly like the one that she's weaving right now. Not to be duplicated. Then, at last, the weaving was finished, but not until I checked it quite thoroughly in front and in back did I let Glenmae take our rug off the loom. So she's weaving and weaving, and Geraldine makes sure to check it out from the front and check it out from the back before Glenmae can take it off the loom. Look at that pattern. There was a lot of me in that rug. I wanted it to be perfect, and it was. Since then, my wool has grown almost long enough for Glenmae and me to make another rug. I hope we do it very soon, because, you see, there aren't too many weavers like Glenmae left among the Navajos. So, Geraldine is admiring the rug and that it's perfect, and she's taking it down and she's saying, "That's a lot of me." And after a year, Geraldine's wool has grown long again, long enough to make another rug, and she says, "I hope we do, because there aren't very many Navajo weavers like Glenmae around anymore." And there's only one goat like me, Geraldine. And the last page says, "This is the true story of a weaver and her goat who lived in the Navajo Nation at Window Rock, Arizona." The end. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you really enjoyed the story, The Goat in the Rug. If you did, please hit that thumbs up button at the bottom of the page. If you're already a subscriber, thank you so much for your support. It really means a lot to me. If you're not a subscriber yet, please click that subscribe button down there at the bottom of the page. And don't forget to click the bell so that you're notified when there's new content. I hope to see you all again real soon. Bye-bye.